Well, thank you, everybody, for coming and being here today on this snowy April 3rd. We're joined today. Our theme kind of for the Alumni Spotlight is about consultation, and I'm fortunately joined with three different graduates from Carlson. And so the plan is we're going to go around, share a little about each, share about their experience, as well as ask questions. So if you have questions throughout, please feel free to put it in the chat. And if I should introduce myself too, I'm Marguerite Ortman. I am in the online Carlson program, and I work at the University of Minnesota right now as a professor in counselor education. And so I've been there for 12 years. It's a little bit about me. And I also run a group therapy practice. And I'm very excited to hear more about the consultation work because I do some consultation work school districts. And I'm going to pop it over to Audrey to share a little about yourself.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I can give a little bit of a career overview. I'll start at the beginning and then end with kind of what I'm doing in consulting right now. I went straight to Target to the headquarters in Minneapolis after my undergrad. Kind of started in the very core area of merchandising, supply chain, demand planning, that kind of thing. And then made my way into digital, where I was working on the website and the app, kind of a mixture of UX, creative, analytics, digital product, that kind of thing. My last role at Target was within Roundel, Target's retail media network, if you've heard of it. There started the digital experience practice for that team, kind of defined the function, determined the roles and responsibilities, hired, and really focused on kind of the digital experience for the Roundel campaigns, focusing really on digital conversion and ROI, that kind of thing. During that time, though, I was wrapping up my part-time MBA at Carlson, and I knew I really wanted to try something different. I interviewed a couple of different places, different industries, and ultimately determined I wanted to try consulting. I think some of the things that really drew me to Slalom and consulting in general was really the rapid pace of projects, lots of different types of projects, lots of quick moving things, and the entrepreneurial kind of spirit of the work. And also really being able to work with a variety of different industries and types of projects. So since then, I've been at Slalom for about 3.5 years, which is hard to believe. And I've really been focused on the customer experience and kind of customer strategy space. And most recently, kind of making my way more into the product strategy space. So really kind of defining the capabilities, defining the strategy for a variety of different new products and solutions for clients in the area. So that's a little bit about me, but we'll talk more later.
We'll pop over to Julie. How about?
Right. Hello, thanks all for being here. I'm Julie Laban, and my career started out in the nonprofit sector. So I was in the nonprofit sector for 6 years, a variety of roles and places, but mostly in operations, fundraising, and communications, and got to come into a lot of smaller or newer nonprofits and help build out a lot of internal infrastructure and processes and systems. Got to find the gap, provide a solution, implement it. And then I was on to the next nonprofit because I realized I like to have a challenge. I like to find those gaps and problem solve. And I also wanted more opportunities for leadership and growth within one company without going somewhere new every couple of years. And so I decided to pursue my MBA at Carlson in the full-time program, and got to get a lot of hands-on experience consulting through the Ventures Enterprise, through graduate volunteer consultants as well, and didn't go directly into consulting. I worked with a fellow Carlson MBA alum who has his own executive recruiting firm for the nonprofit sector, and got to help him build out a lot of internal infrastructures and how he was capturing data and using that to improve his practices. And I got to do part of the hiring and coaching nonprofits and how to hire people as well. And then realized I really missed working on a team and collaborating with lots of groups of people and getting to have a lot more variety in my day-to-day work. And so started talking to small consulting firms and landed at Pepper Foster Consulting, where I am now, mainly doing change management consulting and strategy consulting, and been there for a little over a year and a half, getting closer to 2 years. So That's a little bit about me.
Awesome, thanks. And Natch, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. I guess there's nobody else, right? Like, yeah, no, all good. I'm Natch. I'm a project leader at the Boston Consulting Group, and I was a part-time MBA who graduated in December of 2021. So it's been a minute, which is crazy. My career started in higher education. I worked in college admissions for a long time, and I needed a pivot for a variety of reasons, but I was ready to do something different. Entered Carlson with the intention of going into marketing. The pandemic hit, and like everybody else, I was making bread and decided I need something different than marketing. So decided instead to focus on consulting. I think it brought together a lot of like what I'd been thinking about, project-based work, travel, which I did during my admissions job, a lot of the communications skill sets that I also developed over time, and just an appreciation for problem solving. To this day, I'm someone who likes solving problems more than implementing the solutions. Like I don't know if that resonates with others, if it's like kind of a no-no to say that, but that's who I am. And so consulting was very attractive. Spoke to Bridget one day who was like, hey, you know what? Those consulting internship deadlines are like in a week. So you should really get on that. It kind of felt like I was being pushed off a cliff. And that's kind of been the experience since then throughout my consulting career. It's like every time I start a project, it just feels like, all right, something new. Let's jump off the cliff together and see where it goes. But to get back to the story, I was an intern at Accenture, which was a great experience, terrific. Went back into the full-time recruiting pipeline, um, ended up at BCG. Most of my work is at the intersection of agribusiness and commercial topics. So, for example, this morning I was proposing a commercial excellence project for a company that's focused on animal semen and like breeding in the cattle space. Not something I expected to do, but I think that's one of the things I love about kind of the cool exposure to different topics and companies. I'm being pushed into areas and types of learning that I'd never expect. Like ag was never on my radar, and so I think that with the people is kind of my big. Those are my big rocks with consulting.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. I'm laughing because I married a farmer and that wasn't the plan either, but I love ag. Now I know all about ag technology. Super exciting. Um, but as we're thinking about like consulting, like I love how you all shared how you kind of transition from what you're doing to the consultation role. Like, what would you are some recommendations for like the skill development or like maybe even classes or things that you would recommend that were really helpful? Like any skill sets also that might be a recommendation for us as current students that would be something if you want to pursue this that you would say would be helpful for you. So I'll let anybody kind of jump in if they want to start.
I would say definitely negotiation strategies. um, I think not to reference this, but depending on kind of what type of consulting you do, you end up doing quite a bit of kind of sales and business development and kind of being able to think on your feet and think through kind of this perspective of the potential client and understand what their priorities are, their needs are, and putting yourselves in their shoes is really valuable. And I think kind of some of those skills really came to life in that negotiations class. So that's one that definitely stands out.
One that stands
Uh,
out. Oh,
no,
uh,
no,
one,
please go ahead.
one that stands out was a marketing class on influencing others. And as a consultant, you're continuously trying to influence your clients to follow the solutions that you're putting forth. And so being able to present your ideas in ways that can be convincing and help them understand and buy into what you're suggesting is a very powerful skill to have. So I'd recommend that.
Persuasion and influence, right, Julie?
Yes, yes, that's
Yeah, yeah. That was on my list too. I agree very much.
I'll take it in two directions here. One is I think some of the pieces that Julie and Audrey have mentioned, and I'll level that up to saying like the soft skills of like being able to communicate, being able to and you can even add in this like being able to do project-based work, which new product development and business development was a class that I did. I was attached to a Medtronic team for a year. And I remember in the first month, I was super challenged to work with, from my business background, work with like biomedical engineers from the U. So now today, when I'm working with UX designers from our digital design group, for example, those skill sets of understanding how um, a different career brings a different mindset to the same work and how to communicate across that, collaborate across that can be very powerful. And of course, that new product development was like you have a client that you're working for, and it's kind of you get to see that side of like clients as X, so everything you do just pivots immediately. So I think that's an important one. I would also say in terms of technical abilities, typically it's something that I feel like gets over indexed on in terms of like where should I build technical abilities? I think there's a few exceptions to that. One is I took pricing. I do a ton of pricing work now, and if I hadn't taken that pricing class, that wouldn't have happened. So think about if there's an area that you have experience in and where you can build some technical ability. Another thing would be if you're not already taking classes that expose you to like econometric analyses, even survey work and interviewing people for consumer insights can be very powerful. So classes that do that, I think could also be really great.
Awesome, thanks. I'm like mentally taking notes. I'm like, I need to take those classes quick. I appreciate that. Kind of next, kind of leading into what we left off there too about the concept of how to break in or transition into the field. Like if you had like a non-traditional background, like I always kind of giggle, people are like, why are you getting your MBA? You're a counselor. Like, yeah. Like, but there's not many people in my field that have that. And like I think of the consultation role of like using the therapy skills, but I would love to hear if how you kind of broke into it or leveraged that skill set that you had to go into your current roles.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, why don't I take a stab at this one? I think for me, it was kind of bringing together different pieces of experience at different positions. So I'd done a lot of communicating as an admissions counselor. So that was a key part of the skill set that I emphasized. Look, I can build relationships with clients. I'm good at developing storylines and conveying content in a compelling manner. There was a key analytical skill set that I built over the different grad school experiences I had. Honestly, I felt like that might have been one of the weakest parts of my resume. I hadn't like used it a whole bunch in my work experiences, but it was there. I knew the technical knowledge for that. So that was another piece. And then there was this kind of element that brought it together of here's a study abroad I did, the new product piece I talked about earlier with Medtronic. Here's all of these project-based experiences that can be summed up as problem solving and then reporting out content to a client. And that's the way that I kind of brought the toolkit together to make a case for my internship. I think the bar for at least my perception was that the bar to enter as an intern was a little bit lower. So I didn't feel quite as challenged as now. Maybe, if I was to make a lateral move or something like that, or even if I just jumped into the full-time pipeline at first, I think I perceived that to be like there I had to really lean more on, okay, I've been a consultant at Accenture now as an intern. Here's what I did in that project. And here's how I know what the field is looking for.
Have a few different things. I think it's similar to Max said, is I drew on those past experiences. In the nonprofit sector, I did a lot of communications work. I did a lot of training, held a lot of trainings, facilitated a lot of workshops, all very relevant to the consulting space, and had some coaching experience as well. And so being able to speak to those experiences, draw on those experiences, and show how it translates well into the space was really important. And then also just networked a lot. Talked to a lot of different people at consulting firms that I was interested in. The GBCC connected me with one of the recruiters at Pepper Foster Consulting. I reached out on my own to another one of the recruiters because we had a lot of mutual connections on LinkedIn, and later found out that because of that networking with both of those recruiters is how they decided to take a look at my resume and interview me. And so just really important to have those conversations, to reach out to people and connect as well. So being able to, draw on those past experiences and then make new connections as well.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, Julie. I think I was going to say the same thing about really kind of networking and exploring the different types of firms that are within the area or in the cities that you're looking in. I think specifically for myself, thinking about coming from like purely a retail background, Slalom is a kind of a big mixture of people who are coming from industry or from other consulting firms. And so I think knowing and being able to communicate that like my retail background really applies to a lot of different industries. In a lot of instances, the kind of digital experience for retail is kind of best in class when you're thinking about payment, when you're thinking about checkout experiences, you're thinking about apps and the website and all of those different type of digital things. I've been able to kind of take my experience from Target and apply it to banks to medical insurance to med device, all of those different types of industries.
Where was your favorite networking experience? I'm going off cuff now. I'm going off the list. What do you think about networking? I think that's such an interesting term because we use it so, and I think working with graduate students, especially in my, like you need to network, you need to put your like, but what does that look like for you all as you transitioned?
I can go come off mute. I think the most kind of impactful networking I had was really when it was one-on-one, when it was someone that I was connected to from someone else that was at Slalom or a different company, and we were able to connect either virtually or in person, and really kind of personally connect on that level, and then also kind of hear about their experience and their background. I found those to be kind of the most helpful to really be able to understand potential opportunities and see myself there, versus kind of large events. But obviously, you need to start at the large event to then find people to meet with one on one. But
I had so maybe I'll kind of give you both the good one and the bad one on this. I actually had a consultant get pretty grumpy with me uh, with my first informational interview because I think I'd been a little pushy and got in also when this person had a very busy week. So on reflection, I think what I should have done is paid a little bit more attention to when the consulting, like where I was in relationship to their process and then using that as a guide to how much I push to have a conversation. For example, if you're talking to somebody like outside of the recruiting or after the deadlines, and if you're like trying to get a conversation right away or rushing, that's not going to work. Like, that's not going to look great. I mean, you might have success with that. Like, don't get me wrong. It's what you have to do. It's what you have to do. Um, but then I spoke to Rachel Wickham, who was a BCG. She had actually spoken at my orientation. So I was able to write to her and say, like, hey, you work in higher ed and are now doing consulting. I worked in higher ed and I'm getting a part-time MBA and I want to be in consulting. Can you talk? And I think the more you can leverage that genuine connection, maybe Bridget's connected you with one of us, or maybe another student, or maybe you have something in common. If you, I think those were the opportunities where I really had like a great conversation that was had the lowest transactionality, and that conversation with Rachel is why I'm standing here today at BCG. Like she just really appreciated some of the perspectives I shared and thought I would be a worthy candidate in their pool, basically. So it can, I think those genuine connections can really matter.
And I started my networking with consultants, specifically started with one of my classmates who had interned at a consulting firm that I was interested in, and it was an easy entry point. And then she connected me to other Carlson grads at that firm, and that was just super helpful to have that connection because even if I'm not, even if their past experience and my experience are different, we have Carlson in. We have that Carlson connection and we can talk about that. I can ask them about their favorite professor, their favorite class, or talk about their favorite experience. And so just being able to know that there's some personal connection that we can chat about besides just consulting or just work is really helpful as well. And just starting with a friend was a great way to get into it. And then from there, reach out to other Carlson alum at other consulting firms and other undergrad people that went to the same undergrad as myself as well. So that was really helpful just to start with those connections.
Awesome. Thank you all. Think about connections. One thing I think too is I'm looking at switching fields. Like, professional associations or organizations, and I love going to conferences, um, for the material, of course, not just location. But any recommendations for those looking to go into consulting, like any affiliations you'd recommend or organizations to become more familiar with?
Can speak to my own experience. So most of my consulting over the past year and a half has been in change management. And so I have joined the Minnesota Change Management Network. And that's been a great experience because they meet monthly. There's a lot of different opportunities to get discounted training and professional development opportunities. It's just been a great place to meet other people, both at consulting firms and at big companies that are doing the same work, and just being able to learn from them and hear from them is really helpful as a consultant. That's just my specific experience with change management. But if there's a certain other area, there are a lot of other professional groups out there that I'd encourage you to connect with and join.
I think it's a little bit different at a BCG in terms of we're really looking for generalists, right? So it's going to have less applicability just because an affiliation shows a little bit of focus in a specific area, which is less relevant if you're coming in as a generalist. Now, there can be what we call like ECT, expert consulting track roles that are in like pricing or in mentioned change management a second ago, or other tracks like that. And that's where being able to say I'm linked professionally to professionals in this area. I've done work there. I think it can help you build a story that says I have focus. But if you're a generalist hire out of an MBA, that's probably going to be a little less relevant.
Yeah, I would say it's similar at Solemn, except for our more kind of technical consultants. We do have a pretty big Salesforce practice, AWS, Snowflake, that kind of thing. And for those consultants, where we do see is obviously like the different types of certifications and skill sets and things that you can get from Salesforce, Google, AWS. And those things are definitely valuable if that's a type of consulting that you would be looking for.
Awesome, thank you. I won't do any more professional associates just yet that I'm hearing, or more conferences. When we think about this is kind of an interesting question in today's world. There's changes and trends happening all the time. Um, when we think about the work you're doing, what are you expecting? I know we're all looking at our crystal ball for the future right now too, on many levels. But what trends or changes are you kind of seeing in the consulting field, or maybe changes you're seeing in the type of work that you're going to be asked to do this year and beyond?
I would say AI. It's very easy to say, obviously, it's AI in a lot of different instances. I think we're seeing the use of it increase exponentially, both from clients as well as internally. And so I think as far as like skilling up, I would recommend like as much as you can to really stay up on the new capabilities and tools and different functions that exist. That's been kind of something. It's hard to stay up on it, but that's a huge change and trend, and obviously only really expected to continue to grow.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Are you seeing
Mhm.
pushback for the companies that you consult with for using it? Because I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of like misconceptions about AI and how it's used, and maybe some fears. Change is
yeah.
hard.
So I had some insight from one of your questions as far as like a recent challenge or project that you're working on. My current project is actually leading strategy for an AI functionality at a large bank. Um, and so to give you a little bit of context as far as what we're doing, we're developing kind of a service agent. So like think about like a call center, a contact center. We're developing a service agent that is AI, that is supporting both the like call center reps, but then also the customer. And so what we're really trying to do is reduce the length of calls and then the number of calls. Um, and it's really fun and a blast, and obviously trying to figure out like how do we get this AI agent to do what we want it to do. But to answer your question, there is definitely some pushback, because for this specific type of use case, the service center and the contact center is wondering like, are their jobs going to go away? Are we going to end up reducing the headcount in those areas? And that ultimately is the goal, to reduce expenses. The way it's been communicated though is that they'll still need service center agents for the more complicated situations, because a AI agent that's referencing knowledge articles isn't going to be able to solve really complex problems. So I would say there is a little bit of pushback. There's some instances where there also are like chatbots that exist that aren't using AI. They're just using kind of like predefined workflows. And so those teams aren't totally bought in quite yet, as far as where this AI type of solution would play. So Julie, we need some of your change management skills in that area. But yes, so there's a little bit, but in general, the teams are really excited and can kind of see the potential, for efficiency and ultimately better experience too for the customers and the service center.
I think so. I've had several client discussions recently about tariffs, right? Like that's been a big piece of what goes on. And I think there's several different response levers to tariffs that I think will dictate a lot of our project work going forward for the next, who knows, 6 months, maybe 2 years. So you can think about this as like short-term pieces of is there something like a quick 4 week sprint to make sure we can build up as much inventory in the US as we can before tariffs go in? It could be a 6 month transformation to change your manufacturing footprint from away from highly tariff nations to on back to onshoring or whatever. So I suspect those will be cases that happen. I think as you look ahead to the state of the economy, some of that could also dictate the kind of work we do. There might be some org work if there's a downturn, some cost work to be done. If there's a rebounding economy, you might see more like growth related items. And there's also some complexity there of the type of industry you're supporting. So if it's an industry that does really well in an inflationary environment or in a downturn, for example, low cost services, thinking about like private label consumer goods, those are places where you can expect to see growth related work in the kind of economy that we're in. So a few perspectives. I'll be honest, the work that I'm looking at right now is kind of all over the board, but those are kind of the trends that I'm picking up on a bit.
Both of my notes said AI and tariffs. So yeah, very much the trends. I guess the other thing about AI is just internally how we're using it has changed a lot over the year, even at Pepper Foster, and I'm sure a lot of other consulting firms about how you're doing your work. And so we've integrated into our change and transformation service offering, and in helping us be more efficient in creating plans and creating communications. And then there's also like the need for the human to go through that and review that and make sure it's coherent and make sure it meets the needs of our client and adds value. And you still need someone to execute on that as well. But there's just a lot of different ways that AI is showing up more and more within the work that we're actually, or how we're actually doing the work for our clients as well. So just being able to become more familiar with those tools and finding those solutions is a big trend as well.
Well, thank you all. I wish I had AI to do my insurance billing calls, but unfortunately I get to go on hold. So I'm hoping the technology will catch up. Our last question, and I can open up the floor too, is the biggest question. What's the biggest challenge you face in your industry or with your specific function? Like what has been the biggest challenge thus far? It's what we call in counseling the loaded question.
Okay, I'll take a stab at this one. I think in terms of challenges, like I touched on like the kind of predictability, the kind of work that we want to be proposing. I think uncertainty in the markets always creates a certain amount of uncertainty in what our clients want to do. It's always different if there's like a clear boom period or a clear bust period. Like that makes clarity in the client's strategic decisions. I think another challenge that is coming up and has ebbed and flowed a bit over the last 3 years is just finding work. Different firms, had this big boom cycle during um, COVID, a lot of our firms staffed up, and or at least a lot of big firms did. I don't want to broadly generalize. And when you have ebbs and flows in the amount of projects that are being sold, it can sometimes, in that ebbing period, be difficult as a junior member of the team to find the next project to go on. And I think that's been a topic of discussion with myself and colleagues and across the industry for a little bit, is kind of making sure on the project. I'm a new project leader, and after by the time you do 2 years as a consultant at BCG, you're like highly in demand. And then you go back to being a project leader one, where you're the least experienced in your cohort, and it can kind of be difficult a little bit to make the case for yourself and say, like, I need to come on board to do that learning. So that's the challenge that I would also point to. And I think the solve there is to candidly ask the question with the people you're networking with about what's the situation been like at your firm in terms of staffing opportunities. How did you make sense of the career for yourself? How easy has it been for you to kind of find that traction and pull? At your firm, do you have to affiliate with a particular practice area closely to get that, or can you actually take the random walk and find pull as a generalist? So I would encourage some of those questions as you're networking.
I can share. I think for my to go talk about like a specific function. So for strategy function within consulting, I'd say especially in a bit of an economic downturn type of situation, it can feel easy to kind of skip an upfront discovery or strategy portion of a project. This obviously would save some money for a client. Sometimes they maybe don't want a longer project type of thing. And so I would say that is definitely sometimes a challenge because that upfront kind of discovery strategy is really important and really needed to determine what's the problem we're trying to solve here. What are the pain points? What are those user needs? To really make sure that what we end up kind of recommending and developing and building is really the right solution. And so being able to communicate that to our clients and make sure that that is really included before we go into the actual kind of build or implementation of a project is something kind of specific to strategy function, I would say.
Say similarly for change management, you're constantly reminding the client of the value of that function. Sometimes they'll want to save money, and so they'll want to cut the change management function, or they'll want you to just train some people to do it, and then it becomes no one's job because it's not part of their title. And so over 70% of change initiatives fail because there's not leadership alignment. There's not anyone engaging stakeholders. There's not sufficient communication. And so it really is a value add. The goal of change management is to realize the value of the strategy that you're implementing or the program or the project that you're implementing. And so people can feel like, oh, it can feel some ways like common sense. Of course, we're going to tell people about this and engage people with this. And but a lot more goes into it than just a few communications or a few trainings. And so that's, I think, a big challenge, especially when the marketplace is not wanting to spend money. So.
I'm so familiar, Julie. We have the same issue with change management.
Well, awesome. I appreciate you all sharing that. And I'm going to turn it over to our audience members if they have any questions that they want to ask. Thank you all for being here too. Molly just put in the chat, are insights you have that would help us stand out as a candidate coming from the part-time MBA program rather than the full-time MBA program? It's a great question.
Yeah, I think because Nash and I are both part-time, I think one thing I think we both mentioned, and Julie, you did too. Well, as far as like in the interview cycle and the networking cycle, being able to really take your industry experience, your past work experience, your current work experience, since you're in the part-time or the online program, and apply it directly to consulting. I think I was referencing kind of retail digital experience and applying that and communicating to how that is relevant to a variety of different industries outside of retail. Um, that'd be my biggest recommendation.
I think that's a great one. I think also this can't be like the main focus of your interest, but you're pulling quite a few hours if you're doing a part-time MBA. And in a consulting environment, the pace of work and the intensity are, at least early in your consulting tenure, going to be one of the most challenging things that you face. So the ability to say, look, I'm committed to growth and development in my career, and I'm doing a lot against it already, and the part-time program is testing that, can be something that's at least an element of making the case for yourself. I think as a part-timer, you should also emphasize that you have taken the same assortment of classwork and like the same, because there are different types of programs all over the country. So, I mean, depending on who you're recruiting for, if you're recruiting for our Minneapolis offices, I would assume most people are very familiar with the Carlson program, at least we are over here. So, but you might just want to emphasize that it's not like a separate curriculum or anything like that. It's very much the same coursework and to your advantage, where you're like Audrey was saying, you're taking the same classes there, then taking it out with you and applying it. Marguerite, I think you're on mute.
Oh, yes, I was. Thank you. I haven't heard that since 2020. Okay, no kidding. Are there any of you open to connecting one with students after the call at some point? And then the follow-up question, if you are, how would they reach out to you?
I hate talking to people, so
Oh, good,
that's why I
good.
chose consulting.
So that sounds
No,
about right. Yes, good.
of course, just LinkedIn is always best for me. But yes, yes, the answer is yes.
Same. LinkedIn would be good.
Same. More than happy to chat with people.
Do that networking we talked about one-on-one. Perfect, great. Other
Maybe I
questions?
can just talk a little bit about outreach attached to that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I used to agonize over like what to write when I reach out to people, especially ones that I had met or on a panel or something like that. So maybe I can just say a couple of words against that. It's always helpful to be very, very to the point in your first sentence. So if you want a coffee chat to talk about consulting, please make that clear in the first sentence of your message, just so I know who, like, and if the connection is Carlson, put that in the subject line of that first sentence. So then as soon as I get the little notification, it tells me exactly who you are, why you're interested in talking to me, and what our connection is. The other thing that I found really helps is keeping it short and then somewhere in there putting in like proactively putting in your availability. So if you say like, look, I'm free on most Monday and Tuesday mornings for the next 3 weeks, that's great. That means I don't need to like send you my availability or like in the case of more senior people, they don't have to coordinate with their admins or anything like that. They can just say, I am free on Monday the 12th at 9 a.m. for 20 minutes. And then it's done. So those would be my like outreach tips.
Perfect. And I see Bridget put in the chat too, everyone's LinkedIn profiles, so you can add and message. I appreciate that, Nat, too, about saying like what you need, what you're looking for. That does help a lot, I know, with time. Any other questions for our team here? Go for it, David.
I'm doing the old school raise my real hand rather than my Zoom hand. Could you talk a little bit about like I guess for someone that's not super familiar, just like the recruitment cycles at your different firms and if it's an ongoing process, if it's project based, if it's a year, just compare and contrast and any insight would be helpful.
I can start. So at Pepper Foster, we're a little unique. We're a smaller consulting firm with big plans and hopes and dreams to grow bigger. But Because of that, our hires are dependent on projects, so there's not a specific cycle. And so we oftentimes have, if we have projects coming in the pipeline or that we think could be coming in the pipeline, we're going to have a posting out for whatever type of consultant or at whatever level we're looking for. And then if someone is hired, they are on the bench, so they're not officially yet an employee. They could go somewhere else if they wanted to. But once we have that project ready, they would start and become an employee. And then in the future, if there's any gaps in between projects, you're on the bench, you're still an employee, you're just working on internal projects at that time. So a little bit unique that you could get an offer and you could start 2 weeks later, or you could get an offer and start 6 months later. So, or somewhere, anywhere in between. So that's what our process is.
Yeah, I can share a little bit. I'd say kind of in the past with Slalom, we've hired part-time and full-time MPAs. We've done a couple of internship cycles as well with full-time MBAs over the summer. We don't have like a formal kind of fall, spring cycle though. I would say if you are interested in Slalom, I can connect you with our recruiter. But we do hire not at project level, like Julia was saying. It's more you're hired to join Slalom and then find a project after that. So yeah, let me know.
Two pipelines here. One is going to be through formal recruiting, OCR, basically at Carlson. And that's going to be your traditional consulting hire. So you're going to be hired as a generalist and again, you'll be brought in, whether it's an internship or a full-time hire you might be staffed on things that are based on your past experience and skill set. You might be staffed on things that are well outside of it. It really depends. There are two other pipelines. There's an experienced hire pipeline that comes in kind of as needed. Basically, work spikes. We need folks. They can be brought in as experienced hires. Those are, again, generalists. They can be at various levels as well, depending on your experience. Whereas an MBA recruiting is going to be at the consultant level, which is equivalent to the senior consultant at most other firms. There is also an expert consulting track, which I mentioned before, where you find a sponsor within the firm who works in a particular area. Like maybe it's pricing, maybe it's sales, maybe it's something else. And you're brought in as an expert in those topics, and that's the only place you work. Those are posted separately and again on an as needed basis and depend very heavily on your past work experience. So those are going to be the cycles. The MBA cycle is roughly in the fall. Now, I don't remember exactly what the dates are. I really should because I was the Carlson like recruiting link last year. But I think it starts pretty early in the fall. So I would suggest if you're preparing for that to get your case interviews and your perspectives on firms and things like that started well like during the summer. And towards the end of the summer is when I would get your like core coffee chats or early fall, get your core coffee chats done.
Great. And I think we have one more question in the chat too. For those who did internships in the part-time MBA program, how did you manage working your full-time job, or did you opt out to solely dedicate to the internship?
I did not intern.
That might be a question for me. I did the crazy thing. I quit my job and took the internship. It helped that I could basically didn't affect my earnings for the year to make that decision. So it was an easy choice for me. It'll be much more complicated, I feel like, for more people. Um, and I think you should really think about your commitment to the industry, how likely it is that you will, like, what does the firm say about how many folks get a return offer? And are you going to be able to start I had my internship in the summer, I recruited in the fall, and I started in January. That's not always practical, especially if it's kind of a low period, recruiting targets are down, things like that. They might not let you start in the fall, maybe more uncertainty. So that's a risk that you're taking. And I took it on. I said, let's do it. It doesn't hurt me. So I think you have to weigh that. Some companies do let you take like a sabbatical for like 10 weeks. do not expect to be able to work two jobs. Like that is no consulting internship is going to give you enough time to actually contribute to whatever you're doing at the moment. So do not make that an option.
Julie, did you have the intern experience or?
I did, but I was in the full-time program, so.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Wonderful. Any other questions for our group? You can just, you don't have to raise your hand, but I do appreciate it, David. I like the old school hand raising. It's fun.
Um, on a more personal level, how do you find the work-life balance with what you're doing now?
And they're all quiet because like, what balance?
Nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news. I'll do it. I'll be brutally honest if I have to. It's atrocious. Uh, I mean, I'll be quite frank. Like I work very long hours and I have to dedicate quite a lot of my life to my job. And there's huge trade-offs and you have to keep your boundaries very strict and make sure that that you're protecting the things you truly care about. This is a decision, like my decision to stay in consulting is something I evaluate on a yearly basis. And this is something that everyone at this firm, from like junior folks to senior folks, will say the same thing. It's something that is a strategic decision in our careers to take on this work-life balance and the stress because it meets some objective for us, either in the short term or the long term. So while I'll be perfectly candid, it is very tough and hard, and it's a constant conversation between me, myself, my friends, and my family. It's something I do willingly and I really enjoy. So take that for what you will.
Coming from Pepper Foster, a much smaller firm, I definitely feel like I have balance, especially after talking to former classmates who are at bigger firms. We typically do not bill our clients more than 40 hours a week. And so when I do work over 40 hours a week, but that's because I want to learn and grow. And so I'm involved in maintaining and building out our change and transformation client service offering. I'm involved in our community and what's it called? Community and culture special interest group, and involved in our pro bono projects as well. And so there is opportunity to have more balance for sure. And but also, if you want to learn and grow, then you have to give a little bit more, but it feels balanced. So.
Yeah, I think Solemn's a little bit more like Pepper Foster in that instance, in that there's no unwanted travel is kind of a policy with it. You can travel if you want to have a little bit, but you don't have to. So it's kind of more on a case by case basis. And then generally, yeah, we're billing about 40 hours for a project, but then similar, kind of if you want to do some business development, or if you want to kind of expand into different capabilities, develop some new kind of go-to-market materials, then that is kind of on top of your plate, on top of your billable hours. But depending on your level, it's not required. So there are people who bill their 40 for their client, as long as their project is going well and their delivery is going well, there's no issue with that. So it's kind of what you make it. You can have either side.
For sure. Thank you. It sounds like, any way you take it, it can be a thrilling journey. Stressful, but thrilling.
Well, there's hope, I'm hearing. Balance. Not for Notch, but everybody else.
No. And there's hope for me too, right? Like depending on what I choose to do with my career. I mean, I'll be honest, I absolutely love it in this job, and that's one of the hardest things for me is like being able to tell the people I love, like, I'm sorry, I really like what I'm doing. Like it's really rough. I don't get to see all of you as much as I want, but like I'm happy. And then there's always these great exits that come up, which have varying degrees. Again, you have to think maybe maybe a segue I can make in just talking about like exits and thinking about that, which is I'm thinking along the lines of like when I leave consulting, what do I want? Do I want the intensity that then comes with title and comp, perhaps, and benefits, or do I want to take a hit on my title and my comp and benefits to get more of that work-life balance in the future? What's more important to me? It prompts very real discussions for me, and again with the folks that I care about in terms of like what am I thinking about in terms of how I see my life in the future?
Appreciate that. I think that's a hard part. It's always hard when you like what you're doing, you like the people you're working with too. You're like, oh, it's a good thing, but also can be hard when you have to, somebody's got to give something. But great. Any other questions for our panelists?
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
So with what you mentioned about how the projects kind of ebb and flow over time with the economy and different conditions, like, do you expect that will also impact the number of open positions over time? And do you expect that to grow, stay about the same, or shrink over the next couple of years?
I think our silence is probably, we're probably not sure. And I think it really depends on kind of what clients end up needing and what they end up looking for. Um, I would say kind of the size of the firms are definitely impacted by business need and client need. So hopefully it'll continue to grow, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in the 3 years I've been here, I've seen our classes go up, go down, like it, and and those things change pretty quickly, I would say as well. So, for example, we might have a smaller class in the fall, but then business like super picks up, and then we need more folks, so we do a experienced hire cycle or something like that in the spring. It's the thing with professional services, I feel like, is just it really does depend on what your clients want at a particular moment, and that affects this piece, the work-life balance piece, everything is like kind of, that client services element really dictates a lot of that. I think practically what you can do against that is talk broadly to the firms to do your research, identify a few tranches of places that you're interested in. And if one tranche has a downturn, maybe there's not a lot of strategy projects being sold or whatever, you have the other tranche to look at and to be interested in. And that helps you hedge a little bit on like firms kind of reducing their targets. And stay close to the GBCC, by the way. They will have the intel on these things and what they're hearing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, we have a few minutes left, and I know Bridget has a very important special announcement to share, but go ahead.
Yep, I'll do my little plug, and then I'll let Marguerite share kind of closing words. But it's been so fun to listen to all of you talk shop and hear your insights and perspective, which is so helpful. And I'm hoping that our audience was able to be like, I want to do that work. I'm really excited and interested in it. So before folks sign off, I do want to just drop in. I'm going to drop in 2 links to the chat. One is just a quick exit ticket that we'd love to get feedback from the audience about the session, as we're always looking for ideas and for future topics. As we were chatting at the beginning of this topic, or the beginning of the session, it was like, oh, should we do a panel about like careers and digital transformation? And so that's where these ideas come from, our discussion. So I'm hoping that link works. A 50-50 chance. But I also want to put a plug in for the fact that Notch is not only with us today, but he is also going to be emceeing our Careers and Shares event, which is an opportunity for the MBA community, full-time, part-time, executive, online, and alumni to come together on April 24th at Surly Brewing and hear irreverent and fun career wisdom from members of the Carlson community, so current and past, and have some socializing, chit-chatting. We know that the power of the Carlson community is so strong, especially for the working professionals who you're juggling so many things, and you're wanting to it's hard to make time to do something that is in addition to, and so we try to make this event is easy as possible for you to attend. And I'm going to just drop the link in here quick. We have this on a Thursday evening. We feed you, we hydrate you, we help you feel inspired and get a chance to meet other folks. We do recognize this is on a class night for some folks, and that we can't undo. We can't get this to not be on a weeknight. But however, we hope to see you there. Again, it's an opportunity for everyone in the MBA community to come together. And so, and yes, not just Buddy is going to be there. Reed from Deloitte, who couldn't join us today. But what this event does, if this talk today was inspiring to you and engaging, you're going to get to have kind of mini versions of this when you're at this event. And I believe, Audrey, your husband told me that you guys are going to try to attend this event, which might be news to you, not trying to put him on blast or you. And so now it's just Julie who also needs to come. And Julie's like, okay, awkward. Okay. Oh, that's okay. Being out of town, that's a viable excuse. But again, we know that what we hear from our working professionals, students, alumni, is that they want experiences that are edutaining, fun, and entertaining. So this will be fun. It'll be educational, and we're gonna, like I said, feed and water you. So we hope to see you there. Marguerite, anything you want to say? Final words before we boogie out?
I just want to say thank you, everybody. I know you're busy, especially our panelists. Thank you so much. We appreciate you sharing your stories, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. I'm off to Twins, so go Twins.
That's true. Go Twins. Go
Go
Twins.
Twins.
All right, everybody. Enjoy
Thank you,
your day.
everybody.
Happy days.
Thank you
Take
so
care,
much
everyone.
again. Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Bye.